hadn't been paying attention to. So I'll make something up. A couple months ago, I'd actually been working on the over-tourism issue and had co-authored a paper that published in a Youth Hero blog post. And then this homie of mine in Kailua connected with me, and he owns a house in Lanikai, and he says it's being overrun and all this other stuff. So we kind of put a thing together. He actually showed up to the cattle call and gave his 3 minutes of testimony to the city council on Bill 89, whenever that was, April or something. And then Kimberly Pine asked him, Councilmember Kimberly Pine asked him if he would be willing to come back and speak to a committee of the council. And he said, I will if I can bring Brewbaker. So we both went down there, and I was expecting another cattle call. I was just doing it for my bro. And it was just us. I know, for an hour and a half. And the people who were most engaged were Tommy Waters and Carol Fukunaga, who I knew from back in the day when I did revenue forecasting with the state, and she was the money chair, whatever she was, a senator or something. And so I was feeling pretty good about this. This was 2 months ago, and my testimony's posted, by the way, and there's a link to it in one of the slides, which will be in the PDF that I'll give to the board so that you get a copy. But of course, they voted unanimously to ignore our recommendation. So I'm gonna, and so I will, because I was asked, I will give you some of the backdrop. I don't actually know what's gonna happen, but if it does, it happens today. And so let's go through that. And then I'll have a little bit of commentary on the usual economic stuff. Okay. Put it on stun, should I put it on? Oh, there we go. So, oh, now it works, awesome. So, let's, I gotta take you back because, as I say, I haven't read the bill. I don't know what's in Bill 89. But starting about a week ago, I was at Ainahaina Starbucks because we're writing, the sequel to the paper we wrote. And somebody walks up and he says, "Are you Paul Brewbaker?" Yeah. He says, "Oh, I'm selling my condo in Waikiki." And I go, "Why?" "Well, because it's a vacation rental." And I'm like, "So it should be in Waikiki, right? I mean, am I missing something?" "Well, no, it's on Pauakalani Street," which I know because I used to live on Lemon Road off Pauakalani Street. And evidently on one side of Pauakalani Street, it's apartment zoning, and on the other side, it's resort zoning, like Trump's Wall. And so his is on the wrong side. And of course, the Marriott is on the right side, which sort of explains the whole thing. So let me walk through what I think is going on with the economics. And so you have to think of blocking political coalitions, right? Who benefits the most from making undocumented vacation rentals seeking a pathway to citizenship illegal? And the answer is the guys that own the hotels, the global brands, who, let's remember, it's an oligopoly. They're the new big five or whatever they are, right? Hilton, which is also Starwood now. Marriott, which is also Starwood, whatever, same smell, Hilton, etc. And they have first mover advantage, right? You remember game theory, oligopoly. They have first mover advantage, enjoy economies of scale and economies of scope, right? They offer lodging, dining, restaurants, recreation, resort fees for things nobody knows what they're for, and they don't collude directly. They don't conspire to engage in anti-competitive behavior. They just become the CEO of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. I'm just saying, that's how it works. And Chris Tatum, he's a good guy. I was on a PBS Insights, talk show, talk amongst yourselves show with Chris Tatum and Keith Vieira about vacation rentals. In fact, I think that's posted somewhere. And this Wahine from Kailua, who was on the neighborhood board, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. And Yeah, we were totally getting into it. So they're good guys. They're hotel guys. And, I'm an evil banker in recovery. So, we all get along. But there's no question that the way the law works is to their advantage. Check this out. They use exclusionary zoning it's protectionism, right? We go to the map, we'll create this box, we'll call it a resort zoned area. It's exclusionary zoning. You can't do other things in that area. Exclusionary zoning. And then we say, okay, all the tourists gotta go live in that ghetto and stay on the other side of the Ottawa Canal. Don't be coming up to Moilili now. You know what I mean? And that's how we roll in Hawaii. I don't know anywhere else that's true. I remember the one and only time I was in Sicily, I was riding the train from Athens to Georgia or something, or what is it? From one end of Sicily to the other, Palermo, yeah? And Syracuse, New York, right? And halfway across the island, a priest in the train cabin said to me that I should not go to Palermo and I should get off in this town of Cefalu or something. And he's like a priest, so you gotta do it, right? So I got off, and where do you stay? In a town like Cefalu on the North Shore, established by the Normans in the 10th century? Or 11th century? On their way to the Crusades? I was just so confused. It's like, I was expecting mafiosi, right? And, I stayed in a little pension or something. I stayed with the family because the mom made me shuck peas before I went off to go be a tourist, which then appeared in our wonderful dinner that night. So, right. So that's how I remember tourism. I don't remember having to go to the ghetto and stay in a concrete bunker, but that's how we roll in Hawaii. And that coalition, obviously a special interest group, that group forms a coalition, a political coalition, a blocking coalition, to those of us who simply are intrigued by the democratization of the lodging industry implied by apps, hosting apps, right? They form a blocking coalition with people who believe in the politics of NIMBY and not building telescopes next to telescopes and stuff like that. And that's it, Bill 89. So here we are. The end. No. So I'm gonna run you through the backdrop. So this is Neighbor Island visitor arrivals. So you can see the 20 teens have been a great run. And then the hurricane, actually, sorry, that happened too, but the volcano happened. And you can see right at the tail end that dip, that's mostly Big Island, but even, by my calculation, even Maui was out 100 million from the volcano, and it wasn't even that on that island. Right? It's asymmetric information. They don't know where the volcano is, right? They just know that they had a reservation in Hawaii, which includes a put option, the right but not the obligation to give the reservation back to the hotel and go to Mexico. So that's what people did. And here we are still trying to mobilize the recovery. And by the way, if you look at where we would have been, I ran one of those regressions you see there. Last summer was going to be the best summer ever for the neighbor islands. And they only got back to where they were when Mesa was flying Go Airlines about 2 years ago. Right? It wasn't until 2016 neighbor island visitor arrivals got back to where they were in 2006. So yeah, the volcano chopped that off. Meanwhile, on Oahu, we've had this great run. It's mostly international visitors, right? We recovered the Japanese, we started getting Chinese guys, the Koreans came back, they went away after the Korean air crash on Guam. So it's been a good run, except the dollar has been a strong currency, which reduces the purchasing power, of everybody, Aussies, Kiwis, loonies, right? Name the currency, the yen, the euro, the Canadian dollar, the Aussie dollar, right? At $120 a barrel, the Aussie dollar and the Canadian dollar are strong currencies, not so much at $60 a barrel, right? And at 110 yen per dollar, Japanese don't spend as much in dollars or dog years as they do at 85 yen per dollar, right? That's just math. You've traveled, you know how exchange rates work. So, visitor expenditure on Oahu, adjusted for inflation, is the same today as it was 7 years ago. That's how much growth there is. More visitors, not more dollars. That's the over-tourism problem. We do it for the money. If we could sell them 3D goggles and they could enjoy virtual Waimanalo from the basement of their house in Bemidji, Minnesota, we'd be down with that. But no, they have to get on a plane and come here to get ripped off on the beach at 1 hour. I've seen that happen. Make sure you tell people, you know where McDonald's is, and the right of the way to the beach down there. Bro, more than once, I see the Japanese tourists running. No, first I see the baba running with the purse, jump on the moped, and then I see the Japanese tourist girl running. I'm not making that up. Okay, so that's going on. More visitors, not more dollars. And when I say more visitors, I mean it was 5 million 30 years ago on Oahu, then it was 4 million, and now it's 6. And we're making as much money as when it was 4.5 million. So that doesn't sound like a good idea. And in fact, as part of a broader problem, statewide, we found from 6.5 million visitors to 10 million visitors, and visitor expenditure is the same today as it was in 1989. Right? So I'm like 60-something. If somebody told me, bro, you're going to be making the same amount of money adjusted for inflation as you made when you moved back to Hawaii in your 30s, I wouldn't have moved back to Hawaii. Right? Who does that? Has the same amount of export revenue as they did 30 years ago, right? If you were the Minister of Petroleum in Saudi Arabia, we were talking about oil exports, you'd be dead, right? But here it's like, ooh, more tourists from Botswana, yay, another record year for visitors. We don't care about the people as much as the money, right? It's about exports, not about aloha. So, and, okay, now I need a prop, sorry. And they all have an app that tells them how to get to Manuili Trail. And I'm sorry, Chris Tatum, my bro, having an ambassador of Aloha standing at the trail funded by the HTA telling them to be Pono does not cut it. Right? With an app and a geolocation algorithm, I can charge them money. This is Disneyland, but we don't charge admission. It's ridiculous. But that's my over-tourism paper, and I'm not here to talk about that. Instead, I'm here to talk about, I'll take questions until the end, unless they're clarifying questions. And so there are winners and losers. Spending did not change for 30 years, adjusted for inflation. So again, in dog years, 18 billion last year, 18 billion in 1989. Okay? But some people gained and other people lost. The total did not change, but the hotel piece went up. I can just go to the state of Hawaii general excise and use tax base and look at hotel rental revenues. They went up. So somebody's making money and everybody else is not. And that's also a problem. How did this work out? Well, once upon a time, Roy and Estelle Kelly could go down to Lure Street, somewhere behind the Red Lion, and build hotels. Remember the Red Lion? Yep. You duck your head when you go inside, yeah. And just don't jump when you're dancing because you hit the ceiling. Yeah, all the bug is like, rock and roll. Right? From the 1950s until 1986, you could actually build hotels on Oahu. The room count today, including Disney's Aulani and the undocumented vacation rentals, is less today than it was in 1986. How is that possible? It's not because, as Governor Ige suggests, for every telescope we build, we should dismantle 5. That's his new plan. Build a telescope, dismantle 5. See, so the rule applied to tourism would be, Disney Aulani builds 1,000 rooms, we close the Hilton Hawaiian Village. That's the actual plan. Most importantly, right? Just saying, he said it. No, I mean, we all lived. Our first apartment was that, remember the condo on Alawai? It said hotel in the front, I don't know, this was 1981. I dropped out of school to go surf, and I lived on Alawai Boulevard in a 1-bedroom apartment I shared with my buddy. He was out here because he was going to train for the marathon, which he did, and then he went back to Wisconsin. And I'm pretty sure it was kind of a hotel. There were people that came and went, and it said hotel on the front of the building, but we were, monthly rental people, and I worked at Bank of Hawaii, and then I went back to school. And I'm pretty sure that all of those kinds of hotels, the ones we all had our first apartment in the 1980s, on the Mauka side of Kuhio Avenue, eventually moved out of the hotel, the resort pool, and into the resident pool, because the second time I lived in Waikiki, I lived on Lemon Road, right? And, behind the Aston and the Marriott, in this neighborhood where drunk people walked back to the zoo where they parked and, barfed on my street at 2:30 in the morning. So that's Waikiki, that's the concrete jungle. But the data are clear. At some point we stopped building. I'm pretty sure it's not because people didn't want to build. In fact, I know for a fact, because I was on Jeremy Harris's blue ribbon panel on the Waikiki hotel room cap. There was an ordinance. In 1997, I was on a blue ribbon panel with Leroy Laney and Tim Mack from the UH on all the tourism bros. And the question from the mayor was, what should we do about the room cap in Waikiki? And we were supposed to have 5 meetings, and at the first meeting we said, lose the cap, unanimous. And then we had a second meeting and we said, lose the cap, and we never had another meeting because that was the wrong answer. But there was actually a law, and then when they removed the cap, you see the outcome. It's kind of like if you allow Aloha and Hawaiian Airlines to collude, then they'll reduce their lift and raise fares until somebody, realizes the entry threat that's always latent, and that was Mesa. But in the meantime, they make money off of restricting capacity. And what's changed that are the hosting apps. Because you don't have to build 1,000 rooms at a time, and your name doesn't have to be Disney to be in the lodging industry. Tutu died, and the accessory dwelling unit can now be a short-term rental with an app. You just entered the market. So that's what's changed, but the room count hasn't. And that works in favor of the predominantly hotel portion of the industry on Oahu. The neighbor islands have more variety in lodging, timeshare, condotel, whatever. But on Oahu, it's still 70% hotels, and they rule. And they have a lot of political power. I'm not saying they actively engage in conspiracies to tilt the law in their favor and change the slope of the playing field. That's not true. They just have to be there, right? I mean, what do former mayors do in Honolulu? They become the head of the Hawaii Hotel Association. What does that tell you? Right? The revolving door thing. Regulatory capture. Oh yeah, we'll let Boeing self-regulate the... What? What do you mean self-regulate? Have you been hearing about this? The FAA never saw the software upgrade for the MAX 800, MAX 900. Nobody'd ever seen it. Amazing. You're gonna get on a plane now? Good luck, right? So Oahu, because there's no more capacity, Oahu routinely goes right to about 83 to 85% hotel occupancy. These are the historical data, right? So they're effectively sold out. That's why the spillover goes over to Waimanalo or Lanikai or whatever. And, or wherever, down here. I'm pretty sure I was sitting in McDonald's this morning, and it's full of Japanese guys, and I'm pretty sure they didn't catch a bus from Waikiki to go down to McDonald's, at the, whatever it's called, Kahala Mall, with whole paychecks and all the Tanantana stores, right? They're probably staying in the neighborhood. They all got into a van, this whole Japanese family. I was like, wow, dude, car rentals, everything. Right, the guys that come over to Kailua, they're the ones in the red Mustang convertible. And then they're like, oh, Polly, how we closed? Now what? If you look carefully at what's happened with occupancy this decade, since that moment that visitor expenditure stopped rising in 2012, occupancy has actually been eroding slightly. We're basically sold out on a seasonally adjusted basis. We went from 83 to 85% occupancy. But you can see, just look at the picture, there's a slight downward drift. Somebody's been chipping away at their lunch, and that's the undocumented vacation rentals. Now, high occupancy allows you to push the room rate, and these are adjusted for inflation. So you see that it's about a 4% rate of appreciation after inflation. What's inflation? 2%. How fast are home prices rising? 3%. How much are room rates rising in the hotels on Oahu? 6% after, including the inflation. So it's good to be invested in that business, or has been. And when you put those two together, occupancy and the real room rate, right, you get what's called revenue per available room, which is a measure of yield. And you can see it right there. There's never been a time when Oahu hotels yielded as much, but in headroom, they ran out of headroom a few years ago. And that's just market forces, because all of the entry, you go look at the data that are enumerated in the visitor plan inventory, the official counts, there were 4 or 5 years ago, there were 300 undocumented vacational rentals officially enumerated in the HTA visitor plan inventory. 4 years later, it was 3,000. You and I know it's probably 7. Okay, so the growth in capacity has actually been in the black market, while the regular market has been sold out. And by the way, so I was so intrigued by this when we went to talk to the council, I actually paid to get some data from AirDNA. These are the vacation rentals in Kailua Census Designated Place, Kailua CDP, approximately 13,000 housing units in Kailua CDP, and approximately 1,000 listed units, and there's the map. And right off the top, you can see they're mostly Makai. Where I live with the other peasants, there are 3 rooms in houses that you can rent. It's like an Uber, except it's a house. And that's what's going on. Home sharing, ride sharing, it's all the same thing. Bike sharing, it just happened, deal with it. We're not going back to the world before the iPhone dropped and you all got a Facebook account. That world no longer exists. But, if wishes were horses, we all ride, and that's what the city council is doing. By the way, the average daily room rate on Oahu for a hotel is about $220 a month. The average daily room rate for a vacation rental in Kailua is $230 a month. Now, higher occupancy, 5 persons versus 3 on average for the state in a hotel room. But this goes to a point. Chris Tatum was interviewed after we were on our program together. Allison Schaefer's in the Star Advertiser was writing a piece, and I remember Chris talking about the problem that the tourism authority has with vacation rentals is that these people spend less money on average than people who stay in hotels. It may be true. Who cares, right? But the problem with this logic is that if we get rid of vacation rentals, we'll have higher average spending visitors. That's his actual logic, which my snappy comeback is, well, if we just wipe out all the people who live below the poverty line, then average income will be higher. What? And shall we put timeshare on that list? Well, no, because that's Marriott, that's Hilton, that's Disney. And another time I'll do a whole nother presentation on timeshare, because that's about risk management. That's about resilience. People who own timeshares show up after 9/11. They show up after the hurricane, right? Not people who have a hotel reservation. They have a put option, right? They have a futures contract for occupancy on which the hotel brand has written a put option, the right but not the obligation to put the reservation back to the hotel within 4 to 8 hours of arrival. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So the basic economics is the apps change the supply side of the market by lowering the barrier to entry, democratizing lodging by allowing individual investors to offer vacation rental. And one thing people have all forgotten in all of this is private property. Don't tell me who can stay in my house. Fuck out of my yard, right? That's an issue. I get that. I used to be the guy who said, well, we all need toxic waste dumps. We just don't need them in our neighborhood. That was my argument against vacation rentals, but now I'm on the other side. So, on the demand side of the market, the hosting apps lowered the search and matching costs that allowed travelers with heterogeneous destination preferences to stay somewhere other than in the ghetto of Waikiki, or the other ghettos like Ko'olina and Turtle Bay. right? They can stay in the village of Cefalu or Cefalu. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I had to shuck peas before I could go be a tourist, which I was later fed in this amazing dinner. It was pork with red peppers and pasta and these gigantic peas, unbelievable marble-sized peas. Right? Supply and demand. You increase the supply, increase the demand, and importantly, appeal to the heterogeneity of travel preferences, which include a completely different set of recreational preferences. So, dude, nobody plays golf anymore. I'm sorry, except old bugs who used to work at Bank of Hawaii. At Bank of Hawaii, when the boss was gone 2 afternoons a week, we were told that when we answered the phone, he was inspecting real estate. I'm not making that up, right? He had us to do the work. You guys remember Dave Ramser? Played golf like all the time, and I was always like, well, can we go surf, for work? And right? Remember, have you been to, Waikoloa has like a tennis stadium? Do people play tennis? I'm just saying. My impression is they're all on the freaking Lanikai pillbox trail, for which so you don't have to pay a golf club membership, but you should. And this is an actual slide. I was talking with Suzanne Case at DLNR. I've had numerous conversations now with them, and they're totally on board. But our idea, so my homies from Kailua, one of them has made an app. It uses geolocation. So, and here's how it works. You put in your reservation to go on the Lanikai Pillbox Trail. It's cheaper at 6 in the morning on Saturday than it is at 10 in the morning on Saturday. Because we use we have an algorithm that surge prices the entry fee to modulate the loading on the trail to mitigate the congestion and to diminish the environmental and natural resource degradation while creating a revenue stream through which stewardship can be exercised by the DLNR. And I sent DLNR this screenshot. This is just Google Maps, which has a bar chart of the typical utilization. And I pulled it on a really rainy day where there were fewer people in real time. Google can tell you how many people are hiking up to Manoa Falls. Google has an app, so should the DLNR. That's all I'm saying. They're already tracking your phone. They are the NSA. So you might as well pay your fee, and then they're like, well, we can't afford enforcement officers. Like, you don't need people. You have drones that fly over the people who didn't pay, and you live stream their sorry asses on a shaming website. Dude, 3 guys in Kailua drinking beer have come up with this stuff. And surely the state. Years ago, I first started talking about this at a Travel and Tourism Research Association conference 3 years ago. Somebody asked a clarifying question. I said, it's on your phone. You don't pay, there's no toll booth. Hey, you drive through the polytunnel at 7 in the morning, shishing, the scanner scans your license plate. You come around Makapu, oh, hell yeah. I got a whole another presentation on that stuff, so okay. And here's the portion of my testimony. Here's the part that's important to you. What happens on August 1st? There are 2 possibilities. It's possible that today will be the same as every day that preceded today, that there's no change, that the threat of enforcement of Bill 89 is not credible, like all the other threats of enforcement against monster homes and the one I love. This is a farm. It's a big-ass apartment building. Yeah, but it's an agricultural condominium. And you can't enforce that? You can stand on the road and look up the hill at the monster house at the top of the farm, right? The entire housing inventory on the neighbor islands for the last 30 years has been built under the agricultural condominium property regime. Oh, are you serious? That's my dad. Okay. He'll survive for, right, Myra? He'll survive for, okay. Where were we? So, it could be that today is just like any other day. We go on our merry way operating our 1,000 vacation rental units in Kailo census designated place and the other 5, 6, 7,000 on the island, and nothing happens. Or everything I've been hearing for the last couple of weeks has come home to roost, and everybody calls you up after this meeting and says they want to dump their investment property, which had been a vacation rental, and now they've decided is not worth the pilikia of sorting out whatever the F Honolulu is doing. And it's the uncertainty about how this is going to work out that leads investors to exit. You know, you can't tell them, well, they'll sort it out. There'll be litigation, you've got time. Yeah, hell no, I'm out, right? That's the opposite extreme. So assume, for heuristic purposes, just a thought experiment, that every single investor-owned vacation rental property, and by the way, I'm not talking about the large global brands, although you may know, Marriott, but not Hilton, has announced their intention to get into the hosting business. They're no dummies. They also were the pioneers of, legitimizing timeshare back when it was pretty much run by failed used car salesmen. Remember those days? But most timeshares are owned by your aunt, right? We invented the condominium in Honolulu so that little old ladies could have retirement income to augment their Social Security. It's mostly small investors, or maybe not so small investors, and maybe they're not all from Hawaii, so whatever, get over it. Not being from another place cannot be a consideration under federal housing law, right? Here, the argument, it's changing the character of our neighborhood, is what white people used to say about black people moving to the suburbs in the 1950s and 60s. And I'm like, what? Did you actually just say that? Do you have like another reason? Because that one sounds a little racist to me. It's changing the character of our neighborhood? What are you, on the Lower East Side and the Jews just moved in 1910? The Irish just came over from the potato famine and now they're infiltrating your neighborhood and infesting it? What the hell? That can't be a reason. There may be other reasons, but most of them have to do with congestion, environmental and natural resource degradation, requiring modulation of the loading on the infrastructure, which if you have a zero price, guaranteed is going to be too heavy, right? That's why okay, have you been to Disneyland? These guys are geniuses. You get your little Max Pass, you sign up. Dude, I went to Disneyland 2 weeks ago. Galaxy's Edge, I never waited in a line once. In July, we get off the ride, we get on the next ride. Unbelievable. I did 9 rides the first day. I was done. Second day, I just sat around and waited for my wife to get a lightsaber and all this other stuff. Okay, I'm just saying, manage it. But suppose that the way things work out, everybody dumps their property on the same day. All 7,000 housing units get listed this afternoon. It could happen. Is that me vibrating again? Good grief. So, that's a different guy. Him I can ignore. Well, the long-term rate of return is dictated by global, right? The global capital markets are where long-term rates of return are determined up to a risk premium and up to whatever idiosyncrasies are going on in your market. So, if you happen to be the home for Facebook and Google and the other campuses, maybe your valuations temporarily are higher till everybody realizes an arbitrage opportunity. I can cash out my house in Santa Clara and I can go move to Boulder and God gives me $500,000. And Boulder's not a bad town, right? So, and I'll show you those data. But theoretically, the worst case scenario is that prices instantaneously fall and then we get back on the same trajectory. This is the log of prices. So slopes are percent changes, slopes are yields. So there's 2 possibilities. One is that nothing changes and we stay on the old path. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that valuations instantaneously decline, and not just for the beachfront homes on North Kalaheo Drive, right? The fire sales externality pushes all the way to Maunawili Valley, right? is this guy's valuation decline means the next guy's valuation goes down, and so on and so forth, because Mike Sklar's has a synthetic asset valuation model that tells you that's what happens to these, right? These are all connected. It's contagion. So the actual outcome is probably somewhere between the best, no change in the status quo ante, and the worst case scenario. And I don't know where we end up, right? I was thinking this through the other night with some of the Star Advertiser guys, and you know, a weird thing about tourism, oh, what about all the guys that book their travel to Hawaii in August before school starts? They're gonna take the whole family down and stay beachfront Wamanalo. Screw you, bro. Did anybody think about those guys? So they're not from here, so they don't get a vote. All right, whatever, right? That's gonna happen. Now the good news is, for tourism, that September is actually, and October are the lowest months from a seasonal standpoint. And so the real impact might not show up till winter when people stay longer, or next summer when it's, of course, the peak season. So we'll see. But it's gotta look something like the upper or lower bound that I show here. Okay, so I think maybe I'll just stop there, because you have a meeting to conduct. Or how about 3 minutes to 5? Okay, 3 it would be better. Okay, so here's sales. You don't care. This is not the bubblicious 1980s, early 2000s, right? Sales on Oahu have been growing at a very steady rate. There's a little bit of an arc, so it's a cycle of very low amplitude. When interest rates were going up, there was some push down in volume, and then interest rates began to rapidly decline this year, and sales have come back up. You can see some of the same thing in the valuations, which again, very smooth trajectory in median home prices, no bubbleiciousness, and a close-up shows that the rates of increase have slowed from 5 or 6% when the recovery in valuations began around 2011 to maybe 3% currently, before subtracting inflation. So relatively low, but relatively stable yields. The bandwidth there is a 95% confidence interval, right? So I'm pretty sure at least for the next couple months, up to the abrupt sudden stop that Bill 89 may induce, we're good to go. And that's what we would look for. We would look in this time series for the thing to go boink, like visitor arrivals did after the eruption of Kilauea's East Rift a year ago. You look for one of those doink kinds of things. I mean, I can show you a whole slideshow of times when that happened. By the way, it happened in GDP after the last recession. Doink, 200 years of economic growth, per capita real GDP broken by the Great Recession. The cycle in valuations adjusted for inflation is clear. The cycles are clearly behind us. We don't have any of the forcing factors that created the subprime bubble or the exogenous investor impulse that led to the Japan bubble. And remarkably, prices have converged to the long-run trend. Sorry, I can't see. Oh, and these are the Oahu and the other California home prices. So you'll see right now Oahu is right back to Orange County valuations, Orange County, California, right, boom, right on the number, which from time to time Honolulu deviates from, right? And so, for example, in the Japan bubble, Honolulu prices went above the California counterparts, and then when California had the dot-com thing in the late 90s, they beat us, and right now you can see right at the tail end is San Jose, Santa Clara, and Sunnyvale prices, and they've had a little bubbleiciousness. Those prices have peaked and actually have been pulling back as people cash out and move to Boulder. Turning to the economy at large, you may have heard that the Fed funds rate was reduced. The target overnight interbank lending rate was reduced by the Federal Open Market Committee decision yesterday to a range of 2 to 2.25%. See, it's obvious. The Fed had changed its forecast, and the U-shaped one at the end there was from June. The inverted U-shaped forecasts are from September, and then December, and then March, and then by June, the Fed capitulated and has now fulfilled the expectation, which they publish, right? They publish their forecast, so you don't need mine. And they also announced simultaneously yesterday that they would cease the runoff on the Fed balance sheet commencing today. 2 months earlier than they had originally announced. So that's the picture pretty much as of today, and it will stay, assets and liabilities of the Fed will stay in their current configuration. There'll be no more runoff. So neither balance sheet policy, neither is there normalization in terms of their balance sheet policy, nor are they, not only are they not raising interest rates, they've actually lowered rates slightly, but don't bet on more of it. The economy's, look, I was really worried about the risk of recession, and I'm not as worried as I was a couple months ago. My colleagues in surveys estimate that maybe 1/4 to 1/2 percentage point of GDP growth has been lost to the trade wars, and the trade policy of the US is the biggest concern of economists. And when you add the other ones, which are stock market volatility, global growth slowdown, and geopolitics, they all reflect the trade wars. The expectation is that there might be a recession next year, but I would say that that's fading at this point. 45% of respondents in the survey last month anticipated a recession in 2020. I think that's done. And their GDP growth forecasts all have us moving back to 2% from 3%. That's already happened. So I think we're back on cruise control, you guys. There's that structural shift in GDP. Hawaii's not kept up with the US. We've not gone back to the old path, and that should be of concern. Also of concern, employment in Hawaii has been declining for years, and the unemployment rate in Hawaii has been declining and was declining even before the eruption last year. So, however safe you might feel about the national economy, Hawaii was never in as good shape and now is in worse shape. Inflation, there's no difference. And I just wanted to make a comment about home building. This is a century of home building. We build as many housing units today on Oahu as we did in the 1920s, plus 1 Howard Hughes tower a year. That's the difference. And if you want to understand what dumping 7,000 vacation rental units on the market would be the equivalent of, it'd be the equivalent of what we used to build every year on Oahu in the 1950s and the 1960s. We build 1/3 of that today. The trend since the 70s in home building has been downward, and the cycle in home building has moved into the U-shaped part of its configuration. And so I have a little concern over the next couple of years. The amplitude of the cycle has narrowed, so we're smoothing out the cycles, but I'd be looking for a little bit of a little bit of soft spot here as we go into the 2020s. I am going to stop there. Mahalo.
Thank you.